What if I told you that everything you thought you knew about Princess Diana's final weeks might be completely wrong? That a truth, hidden for over 25 years, has just come to light, and it's been sitting silently in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Prince William, at the age of 43, has finally confirmed what countless royal watchers, journalists, and even his closest friends had long suspected, but no one dared to speak out. He recently discovered a letter, written by Diana herself, just weeks before her tragic death. A letter that was hidden from him, locked away from the world, for more than a quarter of a century. And what he read inside didn't just tug at his heart. It reshaped everything he thought he knew about her final days. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being 15 years old, losing your mother in a way that shakes the world, and carrying that grief into adulthood, believing you understand what happened in those last weeks. Then, nearly 3 decades later, you discover a piece of the puzzle that changes everything. That's exactly what William experienced, and the weight of it, the shock, the guilt, the revelation, is something almost unimaginable. It's a story of love, loss, betrayal, and finally, hidden truths coming to light. But before we get into the letter itself, we need to understand why this matters, why this story is shaking the foundations of what we thought we knew about the British royal family, and why Prince William's revelation has set the world talking. For years, the public has speculated, theorized, and even obsessed over Diana's final days. Paparazzi photos, tabloid headlines, biographies, documentaries, everyone wanted a glimpse into the truth behind the fairy tale and the tragedy. Yet for all that speculation, for all the headlines claiming insight, the reality remained locked away, personal, and deeply intimate. Diana's struggles, her fears, her hopes, were largely filtered through lenses that were never meant to see the full story. And now, decades later, William holds a part of that story that was never shared, a part that reveals emotions, intentions, and fears we never could have guessed. But let's pause for a moment and consider this. What was it about this letter that kept it hidden for so long? Why did it take until William turned 43 to finally confront the truth his mother left behind? And what does this mean, not just for him, but for the world's understanding of Diana, the royal family, and even the pressures and politics that surrounded her final months? These are questions we will explore in detail because the implications go far beyond one private letter. They strike at the heart of how history is written, how stories are controlled, and how grief can be manipulated, even decades later. William's discovery did not happen by accident. It was the result of a careful, painstaking process, a series of events that led him to a hidden archive, a forgotten collection of personal correspondence, and a truth that had been buried by time and circumstance. For a man who has spent his entire life in the public eye, who has carried the weight of royal expectations and the enduring shadow of a beloved mother, this discovery was profoundly personal, and it was deeply emotional. Imagine reading words from your mother that you never knew existed, words written with her voice, her hand, her intention, capturing feelings she couldn't share while alive. The impact is unimaginable, and yet, this letter did more than evoke emotion. It challenged everything William thought he understood about the last chapter of her life. From the first lines, the tone is intimate, almost confessional. It's a window into Diana's mind, a lens that reveals her vulnerability, her love, her fear, and her courage. It's one thing to read about a person's life in a biography or see them on television. It's another to hear them speak directly to you, across decades, with honesty and raw emotion. And for William, this was more than a memory. It was a revelation. It offered insight into decisions, relationships, and pressures that had shaped Diana's final days. It also raised questions, some painful, about what others knew, who kept information from him, and what truths the royal family had tried to protect or hide from the public eye. What's particularly shocking, and what has captured the attention of the world, is how the letter reframes the narrative surrounding Diana's final days. For years, there have been rumors. Some wild, some plausible, some heartbreakingly close to reality, but nothing concrete. Now, for the first time, William holds undeniable proof of his mother's state of mind, her intentions, and even her fears. The letter touches on emotions she could never fully articulate to the public: her loneliness, her struggles with trust, and her determination to protect her children from the tumult around her. And as he read it, he realized that so much of what he had believed, so many assumptions about her final weeks, was incomplete, if not entirely wrong. Consider this. What would it be like to grow up with a public image of your mother, a princess of the people, a global icon, while carrying your own private grief and memories? And then, decades later, finding a piece of her that you never knew existed, a piece that challenges the very foundation of those memories? For William, it was a collision of past and present, of personal grief and historical curiosity, that forced him to reevaluate not just his mother, but himself, his family, and the world that had watched her life and death unfold. The emotional weight is almost unbearable to imagine. The letter contains passages that reveal Diana's love for her children in ways that were never public, her concerns about their futures, and, perhaps most strikingly, reflections on her own mortality. It's rare to get such unfiltered insight from someone so revered, someone whose life was constantly scrutinized and interpreted by others. And yet, here it was, a deeply human voice, speaking across time, reaching out to her son with clarity, love, and perhaps even subtle warnings about the world they all lived in. Now, you might be wondering, why is William sharing this now? Why at 43, after carrying this weight privately for decades? There are several possibilities. Perhaps it's the culmination of a personal journey, a step toward reconciliation with his own past. Perhaps it's a desire to finally tell the truth, unfiltered, to the world that has long speculated about his mother's final days. Or maybe it's a recognition that time allows for reflection, and that certain truths, no matter how painful, are meant to be shared when the moment is right. Whatever the reason, the timing is significant, and the consequences, both personal and public, are profound. But here's where the intrigue deepens. The letter doesn't just speak to William's memories. It hints at secrets that involve others in Diana's life, people who were close, people who may have intentionally withheld information, or who shaped events in ways the public never understood. The implications are staggering, and as William reads and reflects, he realizes that this isn't just a personal discovery. It's a revelation that could rewrite the story of one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century. Imagine sitting in his shoes for a moment. Decades of grief, decades of assumptions, and suddenly, the past comes alive in ink and paper. The shock, the grief, the validation, the heartbreak, all rolled into one. And yet, the letter is not just a source of pain. It's a source of understanding, a chance for closure, and perhaps a guide for navigating the legacy left behind by a mother whose life was both extraordinarily public and heartbreakingly private. And this is exactly why this story matters now, because it reminds us that history is not always what we think, that public narratives can hide private truths, that grief, love, and human emotion don't disappear. They simply wait for the right moment to be acknowledged. For William, this letter was not just a piece of paper. It was a doorway, a mirror, a message, and a revelation all at once. And as he contemplates what to do with it, the world waits with bated breath. So what did Diana write? How does it reshape our understanding of her final weeks, her intentions, and her feelings toward the royal family? What hidden truths have been kept from the public eye? And perhaps most importantly, how does this discovery affect William's understanding of himself, his mother, and his role in a family whose every move is scrutinized by millions? These are the questions that will drive this story, the questions that will unfold over the next hour, as we peel back layers of secrecy, emotion, and revelation, chapter by chapter. And here's the kicker. The first revelation William encounters in that letter is so startling, so unexpected, that it left him questioning everything he thought he knew. It's the kind of insight that changes history, not with loud declarations or headlines, but quietly, profoundly, in the private spaces of a mother's words to her son. What came next? What truth did Diana reveal that had remained hidden for so long? That's where this story truly begins, and what we're about to explore together will challenge everything you think you know about Princess Diana, her life, and her final days. Even at 43, Prince William carries shadows from his childhood, shadows shaped by loss, by fame, by a mother the world adored, and by memories that no photograph or headline could ever capture. But what many don't realize is that those shadows are more than memories. They are living, breathing traces of a past that has never fully let go. And now, in the wake of a revelation that has rocked the royal family and the world, those shadows have taken on a new form. A hidden letter from Princess Diana, written just weeks before her tragic death. To understand the significance of this discovery, we have to go back to the beginning. William, as a child, was thrust into a world that few could truly comprehend. He was the eldest son of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, heir to a monarchy watched by millions. But his life was never simple, never just a series of ceremonial appearances and palace events. It was a life intertwined with grief, expectation, and the constant gaze of the public eye. Imagine being 15, and every moment of your childhood, every smile, every tear, is dissected and broadcast to the world. Imagine feeling love, fear, confusion, and sorrow all at once, with nowhere to hide. Diana, for all her grace, charm, and compassion, was also deeply human. Behind the global image of the Princess of Wales, she was a mother navigating a world that was often cruel, judgmental, and invasive. She wanted to protect William and Harry from the pressures of their royal roles, to give them as normal a childhood as possible, yet the very circumstances of their birth and family meant that normalcy was almost impossible. And it was in this environment that William learned the first lessons of grief, loyalty, and resilience. From the outside, Diana appeared unshakable, a beacon of warmth and charm who captivated the world. But inside the walls of Kensington Palace, she was fiercely protective, deeply emotional, and occasionally terrified for her children's future. Those who were close to her recall the late nights, the whispered conversations, the letters she wrote to herself and sometimes to William and Harry, capturing her thoughts in private when the public eye could not. And it is one of those letters, the one William has just rediscovered, that illuminates the truth behind the image, behind the smile, behind the enduring myth of the beloved princess. William's childhood was marked by contradictions. On one hand, he had access to privilege, wealth, and security that few could imagine. On the other, he was navigating loss in real time. His parents' strained relationship, the endless media attention, and the growing realization that life, even in a palace, was not as safe or predictable as he once believed. For William, Diana was both a figure of comfort and complexity. She was a mother who loved fiercely, who wanted to shield her children from heartbreak, yet could not fully escape the forces that threatened to fracture her family. And then, of course, came the tragedy. August 31st, 1997, a date that is etched in history and in the hearts of millions. Diana died in a car crash in Paris, a loss that sent shockwaves across the world. For William, it was not just a public tragedy, it was intensely personal. He was 15, Harry just 12, and they were suddenly thrust into a whirlwind of grief, responsibility, and media scrutiny. The world mourned, yet William and Harry were left to navigate their pain in private, carrying memories that could never be shared openly. The loss of his mother left William with questions, with regrets, and with an incomplete understanding of her final thoughts and emotions. Over the years, William has spoken occasionally about Diana, about her love for him and Harry, about the lessons she imparted and the struggles she faced. But he has rarely shared the intimate details of his inner life, the way he wrestled with grief, or how he processed the conflicting narratives about his mother that the world presented. The letter he discovered changes all of that. It is a reminder that, even after decades, the past can resurface in ways that are both shocking and profoundly emotional. Consider the weight of such a discovery. For nearly 26 years, William lived without the knowledge contained in that letter. Every memory of his mother, every understanding of her final weeks, was built on partial information, speculation, and the stories he was told. And then, suddenly, a single piece of paper, written in her own hand, arrives and reframes everything. It is more than just a letter. It is a key to unlocking decades of misunderstanding, a window into Diana's mind, and a mirror reflecting William's own experiences, fears, and emotions. In those early weeks after Diana's death, William had to navigate public grief while also managing personal heartbreak. The media was relentless. Every move, every statement, every appearance was scrutinized. The tabloids, which had played such a large role in Diana's life, continued to shape the narrative, often portraying events in ways that were incomplete, misleading, or sensationalized. For William, this was a lesson in resilience and skepticism. He learned early that the world outside the palace walls often distorted reality, that appearances could be deceiving, and that even those closest to you could be influenced by external pressures. Yet, despite this, Diana remained a guiding presence. Through photographs, videos, and memories, her influence persisted. And now, with the discovery of her letter, that presence has taken on a new, almost tangible form. For William, reading her words was like speaking to her directly, across decades, in a way he never could have anticipated. It was a reminder that her wisdom, her insight, and her love were enduring, that they could still shape his understanding of life, family, and the world. What makes this letter so extraordinary is not just its timing, or even its content, but the context in which it was hidden. For decades, certain truths were obscured, not by accident, but by circumstances, by human decisions, and perhaps by protective instincts. To uncover this letter required patience, persistence, and a willingness to confront emotions that William had long held at a distance. It required facing the reality that the past, even when painful, still holds lessons, revelations, and truths that cannot be ignored. And now, after decades of silence, William has opened that door. The words on the page reveal emotions he had never known, intentions he had only guessed at, and insights that shed light on Diana's state of mind in those final weeks. They offer clarity where there was confusion, context where there was speculation, and, perhaps most importantly, closure where there was once only unanswered questions. The significance of this discovery cannot be overstated. For William, it is intensely personal, a bridge to a past he has long sought to understand. For the public, it is a rare glimpse into the private life of a woman who captivated the world, revealing emotions and thoughts that have remained hidden for a generation. And for history, it is a reminder that even well-documented lives, even those lived in the public eye, can hold secrets, waiting patiently to be revealed. But here's where the story becomes even more compelling. The letter does more than confirm known facts. It challenges assumptions, confronts contradictions, and introduces revelations that no one could have anticipated. It speaks to Diana's courage, her fears, her love for her children, and her desire to protect them in ways that were never made public. And as William digests its contents, he is forced to reconcile what he has long believed with what he now knows, a process that is both painful and transformative. Imagine being in his position, years of grief, decades of reflection, and suddenly, a revelation that forces you to see your mother, your childhood, and even your own life in a completely new light. It is a collision of past and present, of memory and truth, of grief and revelation. And as he moves forward, William carries not only the weight of his own emotions, but the responsibility of how to handle this newfound knowledge. How much to reveal, how much to keep private, and how to ensure that Diana's voice is heard accurately and respectfully. As we explore this story in the chapters ahead, we will delve into the details of Diana's life, her final weeks, and the secrets that the letter contains. We will examine the pressures of the royal family, the media scrutiny, and the personal challenges that shaped William's understanding of his mother. And we will uncover the moments of emotional revelation, the twists that challenge our assumptions, and the insights that offer closure, understanding, and perhaps even healing. But before we can get there, we must understand the foundation, the shadow of Diana's presence in William's life, the ways in which her absence shaped him, and the context in which this extraordinary letter was written. Because only by understanding the past can we truly grasp the impact of what has now been revealed. And what William discovered in that letter, the truth about Diana's final thoughts, her hopes, and her fears, was just the beginning. The revelations that followed would not only challenge his understanding of her life, but would shake assumptions about the monarchy, the media, and the narratives that have endured for decades. The first shock, the first glimpse into the depth of her message, left him stunned, questioning, and more determined than ever to uncover the full story. A letter lost for more than 25 years, hidden in plain sight, forgotten, or perhaps intentionally set aside. For decades, it remained just a memory, a ghost of communication between mother and son that neither the world nor William could touch. And then, finally, it surfaced. But how does a letter, written in the quietest, most private moments of a mother's life, remain hidden for so long? And why did it take until William turned 43 to finally read its words? The story of the hidden letter begins not in the glare of public attention, but behind the closed doors of a palace, in archives that very few were allowed to access. It was tucked away, carefully preserved but largely forgotten, a relic of a personal world that Diana had never wanted exposed. Those closest to her knew of her habit of writing letters, sometimes to friends, sometimes to family, sometimes even to herself. But none could have predicted that one of these letters would remain undiscovered for decades, waiting to change history in ways no one could imagine. For William, the discovery was accidental yet inevitable. A routine visit to the palace archives, prompted by ongoing efforts to organize Diana's personal papers, led him to a small, unassuming folder labeled only with initials. It was not the kind of thing that would normally draw attention, but William's curiosity, a trait inherited from his mother, compelled him to look closer. And there it was, a letter in Diana's handwriting, crisp despite the years, its ink slightly faded but its presence unmistakable. He hesitated at first. For decades, he had carried assumptions about what she had felt in her final weeks. He had built a mental narrative, pieced together from conversations with close friends, palace aides, and the media's portrayal of her last months. But this letter was a direct line from his mother herself, unfiltered and raw. The first words, written in her hand, demanded attention. They were personal, immediate, and intimate, not for public consumption, and yet here they were, speaking directly to him across the years. And then came the realization. Someone had hidden this letter. Not maliciously, perhaps, but deliberately. Perhaps it was to protect William from pain too intense for a teenager to bear. Perhaps it was to shield sensitive information from the press. Perhaps it was simply overlooked. Whatever the reason, the letter's absence had shaped decades of assumptions, leaving gaps in William's understanding of his mother's final days. Opening the letter, he was struck first by the voice, familiar, loving, and unmistakably Diana. The words flowed with emotion, expressing concerns, reflections, and love in a way no one else could articulate. As he read, he realized that the letter contained truths that contrasted sharply with the public narrative of Diana's life at the time. The world had believed she was vulnerable, isolated, and constantly under pressure. But the letter revealed nuances, thoughts, and intentions that had never been reported, never documented, and never understood. It was not just a letter. It was a window into Diana's private world. Her words were deliberate, carefully chosen, and yet deeply personal. She spoke of love for her children, of fears for their safety and emotional well-being, and of the complexities of her relationships with those closest to her. And amid these reflections were hints, subtle, almost coded, about decisions she had made and events that had occurred in her final weeks. For William, each line was a revelation. Each phrase sparked a cascade of questions, emotions, and memories that he had carried silently for decades. As he continued reading, William was struck by the contradictions between what he had long believed and what the letter revealed. He had assumed certain pressures came from specific individuals, that certain decisions were dictated by circumstance, and that certain fears were his alone to carry. But the letter challenged these assumptions. It painted a fuller picture of Diana's experience, a picture that was at once intimate and illuminating. The private fears, the personal warnings, and the expressions of love reshaped his understanding of the final chapter of her life. It's worth noting the care with which the letter had been preserved. Whoever had stored it understood its significance, even if it wasn't shared immediately. The paper was kept flat, the ink shielded from light, the contents placed in a folder separate from other correspondence. This attention to detail suggests that the letter was never intended to be lost. It was simply meant to wait until the right person and the right moment came along. For William, That moment had arrived decades later, at a time when he could process, understand, and share its contents with both perspective and emotional resilience. The discovery also raised deeper questions. Why had the letter been kept from him for so long? Were there other documents, other communications, that had been hidden for similar reasons? And what did this say about the narrative that had been constructed around Diana's final weeks? William found himself not only reading words but piecing together a puzzle, reconciling past memories with new information and confronting truths that were long buried. Even as he turned the pages, the emotional weight was almost unbearable. Each paragraph reflected Diana's love, but also her concern, her fear, and her determination to protect her children. She wrote not as a public figure, but as a mother, a role that transcended all titles, all ceremonies, all royal expectations. The intimacy of her words struck him deeply, evoking emotions that had lain dormant for decades. He laughed quietly at moments of her dry humor, felt sorrow at her expressed loneliness, and experienced the subtle sting of regret for time lost, for words unspoken, and for the distance that life had imposed between them. One of the most startling elements of the letter was the foresight Diana demonstrated. She anticipated challenges, noted pressures that would arise, and even hinted at the ways public perception might distort reality. It was as if she had written not just to comfort and guide her son, but also to provide a roadmap for navigating the complexities of a life lived under constant scrutiny. For William, this guidance was both humbling and profoundly moving. Here was his mother, speaking to him across decades, reminding him of her presence, her wisdom, and her enduring influence. Yet amidst the love and guidance, there were questions. The letter hinted at events and emotions that had been obscured, misrepresented, or misunderstood. There were mentions of individuals whose influence had been underestimated, of decisions whose ramifications he had not fully appreciated, and of warnings that were subtle but unmistakable. William realized that this single document had the power to change not only his perception of his mother, but also the broader understanding of her life, her struggles, and the dynamics of the royal family during that time. And the shock didn't end there. As he read deeper into the letter, William began to uncover references to people and incidents that contradicted long-held beliefs. Certain assumptions about alliances, conflicts, and motivations were challenged. He discovered that some of the pressures he had attributed to one source were actually the result of another, and that decisions he had viewed as purely reactive had been informed by foresight and deliberate planning on Diana's part. The revelations were startling, and at times, deeply unsettling. It became clear that this was more than a simple letter. It was a record of love, a testament to foresight, and a chronicle of hidden truths. For decades, the world had operated under narratives shaped by public perception, media interpretation, and speculation. But here, in Diana's handwriting, was authenticity, pure, unfiltered, and direct. William realized that the letter was not just a connection to the past. It was a revelation capable of reframing everything about the way we understood Diana's final days. The hidden letter also illuminated a more personal truth. The ways in which William had coped with grief, misunderstanding, and absence. He recognized that his memories had been incomplete, filtered through a lens of assumption and expectation. And as he processed Diana's words, he felt both the sting of lost time and the warmth of renewed connection. The emotional impact was profound, reshaping decades of understanding in a matter of moments. And yet, as powerful as the letter was, it also raised new questions. What else might be hidden in Diana's private writings? Were there other messages, letters, or confessions that could further illuminate her life, her fears, and her love for her children? And most importantly, how would William reconcile these revelations with the public story, the legacy of his mother, and the ongoing expectations of a life lived in the spotlight? But the most shocking moment was yet to come. Just when William thought he had absorbed the letter's revelations, he encountered a passage so unexpected, so profound, that it left him questioning everything he had believed about Diana, the events surrounding her final weeks, and the people he had trusted most. It was a passage that would not only alter his understanding of his mother, but would send ripples across the royal family, the public, and history itself. The final weeks of Princess Diana's life were a mix of public appearances, private struggles, and pressures that few could truly understand. On the surface, she maintained her iconic poise, her radiant smile, and her public charm. But beneath that carefully curated exterior, a storm was brewing. A storm of emotion, uncertainty, and concern for her family that few could see. And as Prince William now knows, the letter he discovered reveals truths about those weeks that are far more intimate and profound than the world ever realized. It all began in the summer of 1997, just months before her tragic death. Diana was under immense pressure. The public eye was relentless, the media increasingly invasive, and the royal family's internal dynamics tense and complicated. But what William's letter makes clear is that the pressure she felt was not just about appearances or protocol, it was deeply personal. She was navigating relationships that were both complex and painful, while also trying to shield her children from the world she could not fully protect herself from. In the letter, Diana writes about the challenges of daily life, the demands of public expectations, and the fatigue that comes with being constantly scrutinized. She describes moments of laughter and lightheartedness with her sons, William and Harry, but also moments of quiet despair, times when she felt isolated and misunderstood. William reads her words and can almost hear her voice, a mixture of warmth, vulnerability, and a quiet determination to protect her family at all costs. One of the most striking elements of the letter is how candid Diana is about her own fears. She writes about feeling trapped by circumstances she cannot control, about the constant pressure of living in the public eye, and about the struggle to maintain a sense of normalcy for her children. These are not abstract musings. They are intimate reflections that show a woman who is deeply aware of the fragility of her position and the weight of her responsibilities. For William, this insight is transformative. It gives him a window into his mother's inner world, a world he could never fully grasp at the age of 15. The letter also provides a chronology of her final weeks, highlighting the moments that mattered most to her. Diana describes private dinners with friends, quiet conversations with her children, and personal reflections that reveal her hopes and regrets. She writes about the difficulty of managing her public image while staying true to herself and her values. These entries paint a picture of a woman who is both human and extraordinary, who navigates life with courage and grace, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. What is particularly revealing are the subtle hints about her state of mind and her perception of those around her. Diana mentions specific interactions with palace staff, confidants, and public figures, offering insights into relationships that have long been shrouded in mystery. She reflects on trust, betrayal, and loyalty, providing clues that challenge conventional narratives about her final days. For William, these passages are both illuminating and unsettling. They reveal truths he had never considered, and they raise questions about events that had previously seemed clear-cut. The letter also sheds light on her relationship with Prince Charles. Diana's words reveal a mixture of concern, disappointment, and lingering affection. She writes about the difficulties of co-parenting in a highly publicized separation, and the challenges of navigating a marriage that was unraveling in the eyes of the world. Yet, even in her candid reflections, there is a sense of protective love for her children, a desire to shield them from conflict, and a determination to maintain stability in their lives despite the turmoil surrounding them. One of the most emotional aspects of the letter for William is Diana's focus on her sons. She writes extensively about her hopes for their futures, her worries about their safety, and the lessons she wishes to impart. These passages are deeply personal and often heart-wrenching, revealing a mother's love that transcends the public persona. William reads these words and is struck by the clarity of her vision, the depth of her insight, and the intensity of her emotions. He realizes that, despite the years and distance, his mother's guidance and love have always been present, waiting to be discovered in her words. The letter also hints at the pressures Diana faced from the media. She writes about the constant intrusion into her personal life, the relentless scrutiny of her every move, and the difficulty of maintaining privacy in a world that demanded transparency. These reflections reveal a woman who is acutely aware of the dangers of public exposure and who struggles to reconcile her desire for normalcy with the realities of life as a global icon. For William, these passages resonate deeply. He recognizes the impact of the media on his mother's life, and he understands, in a new way, the challenges she faced in protecting herself and her children. Beyond the practical challenges, the letter reveals Diana's emotional resilience. She writes about moments of self-doubt, fear, and sorrow, but also about moments of joy, hope, and determination. She reflects on her achievements, her relationships, and the ways in which she sought to make a difference in the world. These passages are a testament to her strength, her courage, and her enduring humanity. For William, they are a reminder that his mother was more than a public figure. She was a woman navigating the complexities of life with dignity, intelligence, and heart. The letter also provides a rare glimpse into Diana's personal reflections on mortality. She writes about her awareness of life's fragility, the importance of cherishing every moment, and the legacy she hopes to leave for her children. These reflections are poignant and deeply moving, revealing a woman who is both reflective and forward-looking. For William, they offer a sense of connection and continuity, a way to understand his mother's mindset and the decisions she made in her final weeks. Perhaps most strikingly, the letter contains subtle warnings and guidance. Diana offers advice on navigating public life, dealing with scrutiny, and maintaining personal integrity. She writes with foresight, anticipating challenges that William and Harry might face in the future and offering insights that are both practical and deeply personal. For William, these passages are invaluable. They provide a roadmap for understanding his mother's intentions and for navigating the complexities of a life shaped by legacy, expectation, and public scrutiny. The emotional impact of reading the letter is profound. William experiences a mixture of grief, relief, and connection. He feels the weight of the years that have passed, the absence of his mother, and the pain of lost time. At the same time, he feels a renewed sense of closeness, as if Diana is speaking directly to him, bridging the decades with her words. The experience is both cathartic and challenging, forcing him to confront long-held assumptions, unresolved questions, and deeply personal emotions. And yet, even as the letter provides clarity, it also raises new questions. There are references to people, events, and decisions that William does not fully understand. There are passages that hint at undisclosed challenges, unseen pressures, and hidden dynamics within the royal family. These elements create a sense of intrigue and mystery, compelling William, and the world, to seek answers that have remained elusive for decades. The discovery of the letter also transforms William's understanding of history. The public narrative of Diana's final weeks has been shaped by media reports, biographies, and speculation. But the letter offers a first-hand account, a personal perspective that challenges assumptions, corrects inaccuracies, and reveals nuances that were previously hidden. For William, it is a moment of reckoning, a way to reconcile personal experience with public perception and a chance to honor his mother's true intentions. Reading the letter is not merely an act of reflection. It is an emotional journey. William is transported back to his childhood, to moments with Diana that are filled with love, humor, and guidance. He recalls conversations, lessons, and memories that are illuminated in new ways by her words. Each paragraph, each sentence, offers insight, comfort, and sometimes heartbreak. The letter is a living connection to a past that has shaped him, a reminder that Diana's influence endures, even after decades. And as William reaches the final pages, the impact becomes even more profound. The letter culminates in passages that reveal secrets, insights, and emotions that were previously unknown. It challenges assumptions, reshapes understanding, and leaves William with questions that are as urgent as they are deeply personal. The final lines are poignant, filled with love, wisdom, and guidance, and they serve as a bridge between past and present, between mother and son, between grief and understanding. But the most shocking revelation, the one that would truly redefine everything William thought he knew about Diana's final days, is still to come. Even after reading the entire letter, he senses that there is more beneath the surface, more hidden truths waiting to emerge, and more secrets that the world has yet to uncover. It is a realization that sets the stage for discoveries that are as dramatic as they are deeply emotional. Even the closest relationships can harbor secrets. Even the most loving families can be shaped by betrayals, some deliberate, some unintended, and some so subtle they leave scars that last decades. For Prince William, reading Diana's letter illuminated truths he had never anticipated. Truths that exposed not only the pressures she faced from the outside world, but also the hidden tensions, unspoken resentments, and concealed decisions within the walls of the royal household itself. It was a revelation that shook him to the core, forcing him to confront the delicate balance between love, loyalty, and secrecy in a family under constant scrutiny. The letter hinted at pressures Diana experienced that had been carefully concealed from public knowledge. She wrote of moments where her privacy had been violated, of confidences betrayed, and of intentions misunderstood. What struck William most was the realization that some betrayals were not by strangers or the media. They were by those closest to her. Friends, aides, and even family members who he had trusted implicitly had played roles in shaping her final weeks in ways he had never known. Reading these passages, he felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could people so close to her, and to him, allow truths to remain hidden for so long? William knew, as the world did not, the immense pressure Diana faced to maintain appearances. But the letter revealed a more insidious dynamic. The ways in which misinformation, manipulation, and intentional concealment had shaped her experience. It was not just the media spinning stories or tabloids spreading rumors. It was also people in positions of trust, people who had the ability to intervene, yet chose silence. In her words, Diana expressed frustration and hurt, writing about moments where she had reached out for support only to be met with distance or deflection. For William, these passages were painful and eye-opening. They exposed the complexity of her final days, highlighting the delicate, often hidden interplay between love, loyalty, and self-preservation. What makes these revelations so compelling is the subtlety with which Diana conveyed them. She did not accuse directly, nor did she indulge in bitterness. Instead, she wrote with clarity and restraint, hinting at betrayals in ways that required discernment, reflection, and empathy to fully understand. William realized that deciphering her words was like piecing together a puzzle, where the picture was incomplete, yet the fragments carried profound meaning. Each sentence, each carefully chosen phrase, pointed to realities he had long suspected but never fully comprehended. The letter also shed light on interpersonal tensions within the royal family. Diana's reflections on certain family members revealed feelings of disappointment, frustration, and emotional distance. She wrote about moments of miscommunication, withheld information, and decisions that were made without her input. For William, this was both illuminating and painful. It explained patterns he had noticed as a child, moments where he had sensed discord but lacked the full context to understand it. The letter filled in those gaps, painting a more nuanced picture of the pressures and betrayals that had shaped her final weeks. Perhaps most shocking were the revelations about those who had acted intentionally to conceal information. Diana described situations in which her intentions were misunderstood, her efforts to protect her children were misrepresented, and her voice was silenced at critical moments. William read passages that detailed the frustrations she faced, not only from public scrutiny, but also from private interference. Interference by those who, intentionally or not, obstructed her ability to communicate freely and protect her family. For him, this was a profound revelation, highlighting the extent to which secrets had influenced his mother's experience and, by extension, his own understanding of the past. The letter also conveyed Diana's acute awareness of the consequences of secrecy and betrayal. She wrote about the emotional toll it took on her children, and on those around her. There was a sense of urgency in her words, a desire to convey what she could before it was too late. In this, William recognized her remarkable foresight. She understood that secrets could shape history, and she sought, in whatever way she could, to provide clarity and guidance to those she loved most. But the revelations did not stop there. William also discovered hints about broader systemic issues. Dynamics within the palace, pressures from advisors, and the weight of institutional expectations. Diana described moments where her choices were constrained, where her voice was muted, and where her ability to act freely was compromised by forces beyond her control. These passages were illuminating, offering William a perspective on the structural pressures that had influenced his mother's life in her final weeks. They were a reminder that betrayal does not always come from malice. Sometimes it is the result of circumstance, hierarchy, and the interplay of human motivations within rigid institutions. As William read, he was struck by the emotional intensity of certain passages. Diana's words conveyed not only frustration and hurt, but also profound love and hope. She wrote about her children with tenderness, expressing her desire to guide them, protect them, and prepare them for the challenges of a life lived in the spotlight. Yet underlying that tenderness was an awareness of betrayal, a recognition that some people he trusted, people who should have supported her unconditionally, had allowed her to face immense pressures alone. This duality, the coexistence of love and betrayal, was both heartbreaking and deeply human. In addition to personal betrayals, Diana's letters suggested moments of strategic concealment. She hinted that she had intentionally withheld certain information to protect her children or to manage public perception. William realized that his mother had been navigating a delicate balance, maintaining transparency where possible, protecting her family where necessary, and managing the consequences of secrecy in a world that demanded constant visibility. These insights were revelatory. They painted Diana as not only a victim of circumstances, but also a thoughtful, strategic thinker, aware of the stakes, and committed to safeguarding those she loved. The letter also illuminated the emotional consequences of betrayal. Diana described feelings of isolation, frustration, and even despair at times when she expected support but received none. These passages are deeply personal, showing a woman who was human, vulnerable, and profoundly aware of the emotional dynamics around her. For William, reading these words was both painful and validating. They confirmed suspicions, provided context for past events, and offered a lens through which he could understand his mother's actions and decisions in her final weeks. Perhaps the most startling revelation concerned trust, the fragile, precious trust that governs relationships, especially in a family as public and scrutinized as the royal family. Diana's reflections indicated that she had been forced to navigate a web of competing loyalties, conflicting advice, and hidden agendas. Her words reveal both disappointment in those who failed her and insight into the motivations behind their actions. William was confronted with a complex portrait of betrayal, one that was not black and white, but shaded with nuance, intention, and consequence. And yet, despite the betrayals and secrets, the letter also conveys resilience. Diana writes with clarity, purpose, and unwavering love for her children. She demonstrates a remarkable ability to process complex emotions, confront difficult truths, and maintain her sense of self even under pressure. For William, this resilience is inspiring. It reminds him that even in the face of secrecy, betrayal, and misunderstanding, love and intention can endure, shaping lives long after the moment has passed. But what makes this chapter of the letter particularly powerful, and what would leave William stunned, is the subtle hint of a betrayal he had never anticipated. It is one of those moments where a single line of text can upend decades of assumptions. Diana alludes to actions, decisions, or omissions by someone William trusted, someone whose loyalty he had never questioned, yet whose choices, intentionally or not, influenced her final days in ways he had never imagined. The weight of this revelation is staggering. It forces William to reconsider not only his mother's experience, but his own understanding of history, trust, and the complex dynamics of the family he belongs to. Even as he processes these revelations, William is left with questions that have no easy answers. Who else knew? What decisions were made behind closed doors? And how does one reconcile love with betrayal, family loyalty with secrecy, and grief with the revelation of long-hidden truths? These are questions that will continue to unfold in the chapters ahead, as William digs deeper into the letter and uncovers layers of meaning that challenge everything he thought he knew. When Prince William reached the middle of his mother's letter, he realized he was no longer just reading words on a page. He was stepping into a private world that had been deliberately hidden from him for more than 2 decades. A world that revealed truths so intimate, so shocking, that it would fundamentally change the way he understood the final weeks of Princess Diana's life. This was the point in the letter that William would later describe as the bombshell, the moment where the past collided with the present, and everything he thought he knew about his mother's experience and the events surrounding her was called into question. The bombshell arrived not as a loud declaration, but as a quiet, precise revelation, the kind of insight that sneaks up on you and refuses to let go. In one of the letter's passages, Diana spoke candidly about her fears, her mistrust, and her growing concern over the actions of those around her. She hinted at decisions made on her behalf, at interference in her life that was both subtle and insidious, and at the existence of people who were supposed to protect her but instead allowed misunderstandings and manipulations to shape her reality. For William, reading these words was like a lightning strike, sudden, blinding, and impossible to ignore. One of the most startling aspects of the bombshell is how Diana framed it. She did not accuse openly. She did not vilify. Instead, she wrote with careful, deliberate phrasing, revealing betrayal and hidden truths in a way that required discernment and reflection. The subtlety of her language left William in awe of her intelligence, her foresight, and her ability to communicate complex ideas in a concise, emotionally resonant way. Every word carried weight, every sentence a clue to understanding what had been concealed from him, and perhaps from the world. The letter revealed that certain events, previously thought to be benign or accidental, were in fact the result of deliberate choices. Diana indicated that key moments in her final weeks, the people she interacted with, the trips she took, the decisions she made about her privacy and her children, had been influenced by individuals whose motives were not entirely transparent. She expressed disappointment, frustration, and at times subtle warning, as if leaving William a roadmap to interpret these actions and understand the forces at play in her life. This revelation forced him to reconsider everything he had believed about the people closest to her and the dynamics within the palace. But what made this bombshell truly explosive was its personal impact. Diana's words were not just observations. They were warnings, confessions, and guidance all at once. She spoke to William directly, addressing fears and uncertainties he may have carried since her death, and offering insight into the complexities of trust, loyalty, and deception. For a man who had spent decades piecing together fragments of his mother's final weeks, this was both cathartic and shocking. It was the revelation of a hidden reality that had remained obscured by time, circumstance, and perhaps intentional omission. William was particularly struck by the section in which Diana reflected on the people she had trusted most. She wrote about confidants, advisors, and even family members, indicating that some of their actions had unintended consequences, while others had been deliberate. The implications were staggering. The realization that certain decisions and events in her life had been manipulated, whether for protection, control, or secrecy, forced William to reevaluate not only the past, but also his understanding of the present. These were truths that the world had never seen, and for him, they were deeply personal. The emotional weight of the letter's bombshell was profound. William described experiencing a mix of anger, sadness, and empathy as he read. Anger at those who had allowed manipulations to occur, sadness at the realization of how much his mother had carried alone, and empathy for the woman who had navigated her final weeks with courage despite the betrayals surrounding her. It was a complex emotional experience, a collision of memory, grief, and revelation that left him shaken, reflective, and profoundly moved. The letter also revealed Diana's awareness of her own public narrative. She knew how the media, the palace, and even those close to her had constructed a story about her life and her final weeks, a story that was often incomplete or misleading. In the bombshell section, she hinted at her frustration with these narratives, while simultaneously providing William with a tool to navigate them. Her words were both protective and instructive, offering him clarity in a world where appearances often disguised reality. The letter became a guide, a private window into her perspective, and a source of insight that he had long lacked. One particularly shocking passage hinted at the manipulation of information and control over what William and the public could know. Diana wrote about conversations, decisions, and withheld information, subtly revealing how certain truths had been obscured. William recognized that this was not only a personal revelation, but also a commentary on the forces that had shaped her public life and the public perception of her final weeks. The bombshell was both intimate and systemic, showing that betrayal and secrecy extended beyond personal relationships into the very structure surrounding her life. What makes this revelation even more dramatic is its timing within the letter. Diana wrote this section in a way that built emotional tension, gradually unfolding the truth with precision. William, reading it decades later, could feel the crescendo, the careful layering of facts, feelings, and warnings that culminated in a moment of intense emotional impact. The bombshell was not a single statement, but an accumulation of insight that left him reeling, questioning, and reinterpreting everything he had believed about the final chapter of her life. The implications of this revelation were immediate and profound. William understood that the letter was not only a personal message, but also a historical document. It challenged assumptions, corrected misconceptions, and provided insight into decisions and events that had long been misrepresented. For him, it was an opportunity to reconcile the past with the present, to understand his mother's perspective, and to confront the reality of secrecy, betrayal, and manipulation in a life that had been scrutinized by millions. At the same time, the bombshell forced William to confront his own emotions. Grief, guilt, and regret surfaced alongside awe, admiration, and deep love. The letter revealed not only what his mother had endured, but also what he had missed, misunderstood, or assumed. The personal impact was immense. He was forced to navigate complex feelings about trust, loyalty, and the consequences of hidden truths. For a man who had carried public grief for decades, this was an unprecedented emotional reckoning. And yet, even amid the shock and revelation, the letter's tone remained deeply loving and protective. Diana's words were a reminder that, despite the betrayals and manipulations she had experienced, her primary concern had always been William and Harry. The bombshell, while shocking, was not just a revelation of deceit. It was a testament to her enduring love, her foresight, and her commitment to guiding her children even from beyond the immediate reach of her life. But the most staggering moment of the letter, the part that would leave William questioning everything he thought he knew about his mother, the palace, and the final weeks of her life, was yet to come. A passage toward the end hinted at truths so profound, so unexpected, that it threatened to rewrite the narrative of Diana's final days, revealing hidden motives, long-suppressed decisions, and a perspective that the world had never been given. For William, it was a revelation that combined shock, grief, and awe in equal measure. The world has always believed it knew the story of Princess Diana's final weeks. Headlines screamed tragedy, biographies chronicled heartbreak, documentaries replayed the events of August 1997 endlessly. But William's discovery of the letter forces a confrontation with a truth the media had never captured, a truth that challenges decades of reporting, rumor, and speculation. In the quiet of his study, with Diana's words before him, he realizes that the narrative presented to the public was only part of the story. And the real story, the one she intended for him, had been deliberately concealed from everyone else. From the very beginning, Diana's life had been a delicate balance between the private and the public. Every smile, every tear, every gesture was scrutinized, interpreted, and transformed into headlines. The media, ever hungry for the personal details of a princess's life, often distorted reality, blurring lines between fact and conjecture. But in the letter, Diana describes the dissonance she felt, how her life, filtered through cameras and tabloids, often misrepresented her intentions, actions, and emotions. For William, reading this was revelatory. The media had constructed a narrative that was both incomplete and misleading, and only now was he seeing the full picture. One of the most striking elements is how Diana anticipated the media's influence. She writes with acute awareness that every word, every public appearance, and every interaction would be dissected, often in ways that contradicted the truth. She acknowledges the pressure to conform to public expectations while trying to preserve her private life, and she hints at the strategies she employed to protect her children from the invasive gaze of journalists. William can sense her tension, her frustration, and her cleverness. Her understanding that the world outside the palace walls was both fascinated and unforgiving. The letter forces William to reconsider the role of the media not just as reporters, but as actors in a broader narrative, one that had shaped public perception of his mother in ways that obscured her real experiences. Tabloid speculation about her mental health, her relationships, and even her daily routines often amplified misconceptions, creating a version of Diana that was partially fictional. But the letter, in contrast, reveals the true depth of her thoughts, the complexity of her emotions, and the meticulous care she took in navigating a world that constantly misunderstood her. For William, this is a moment of clarity and of anger. How much of his mother's life had been distorted by the very institutions charged with reporting the truth? William also begins to see the interplay between the media narrative and the secrecy within the palace itself. The letter suggests that certain truths were intentionally withheld from the press, either to protect reputations or to avoid public scandal. Diana writes about moments where she felt misrepresented, misunderstood, or ignored, and she provides insight into how palace communications shaped the public story. It becomes clear to William that the media did not operate in isolation. Rather, it was part of a larger ecosystem of secrecy, perception management, and narrative control. Her words illuminate the mechanics behind the headlines, revealing how truth, rumor, and strategy often intertwined. One particularly revealing passage describes an incident in which Diana attempted to clarify a misconception about her personal life, only to find her words filtered, distorted, or ignored by the press. She writes about the frustration of being publicly misrepresented while privately managing a life filled with care, responsibility, and love for her children. For William, this passage is deeply personal. It reflects not only her struggles with the media, but also the subtle ways in which misinformation affected him and Harry, shaping their understanding of her final days and their own role within the royal family. The letter also challenges some of the most enduring narratives about Diana's state of mind. For decades, media portrayals suggested vulnerability, instability, and distress in ways that simplified a far more complex reality. Diana's words, however, convey awareness, strategic thinking, and emotional resilience. She describes her actions not as reactive, but deliberate, highlighting her capacity to navigate a hostile environment while maintaining her integrity and protecting her family. William is struck by her foresight. She had always understood how the media could manipulate perception, and she had written with an awareness of the power of her words, both public and private. As he reads, William begins to understand that the media narrative, while powerful, was incomplete. It presented fragments of truth amplified with speculation, misinterpretation, and sensationalism. But in the letter, Diana provides context, clarity, and nuance. Her reflections reveal motivations, pressures, and intentions that were invisible to journalists, biographers, and even close friends. For William, this is both illuminating and deeply emotional. A reminder of how much of his mother's life was obscured by external perception and how critical it is to revisit history with a discerning eye. The letter also addresses the consequences of the media's intrusion on her life. Diana writes candidly about the stress, exhaustion, and anxiety caused by constant scrutiny. She speaks about moments when the paparazzi interfered with her daily routines, her attempts to shield her children, and her frustration at a world that demanded perfection while punishing vulnerability. These passages are deeply human, revealing a woman who is simultaneously public icon and private individual. For William, they provide insight into the emotional toll that fame, combined with misrepresentation, exacted on his mother. One of the most compelling aspects of the letter is how Diana guides William in understanding the difference between perception and reality. She writes about the danger of accepting public narratives at face value, urging him to look deeper, to question assumptions, and to trust his own judgment. William recognizes this as a form of emotional inheritance, wisdom passed from mother to son, equipping him to navigate the complexities of a life under scrutiny. In her words, he finds both solace and instruction, a framework for interpreting not only her past, but the ongoing pressures of royal life. The letter also hints at specific moments in her final weeks that had been misreported or misunderstood by the press. Diana provides her perspective on interactions, events, and relationships, offering insight that contrasts sharply with the public record. These revelations are at times subtle, at times profound, but always illuminating. For William, they represent the opportunity to reconcile the fragmented, often sensationalized media narrative with the lived reality of his mother's final days. Perhaps most striking is how the letter conveys both love and instruction. Diana's reflections are not merely corrective, they are guiding. She anticipates the pressures William will face as he matures, offering insight into human behavior, perception, and the interplay between truth and public narrative. Her words are deeply personal, yet universally resonant, a reminder that the way stories are told can shape understanding, emotions, and legacy. William is left with a profound sense of connection to his mother, even decades after her passing. And yet, even as the letter clarifies and illuminates, it also sets the stage for further revelations. Diana's reflections hint at secrets that extend beyond the media, into the inner workings of the palace, the relationships that shaped her life, and the forces that influenced her.